you will be impossible to ignore. I guarantee you. The 2026 Golden Globes just changed the podcast industry forever. We'll explain how and what that means for you in your business in this episode. This is the Video Lab show where we discuss video marketing, video content, and video platforms.
There are so many different types of podcasts that are out there and ways to engage with your audience that if you're not in that space, you're missing out.
A video podcast for your business is one of the best types of content that you can have.
Whether it's learning or entertainment, whatever it is, I think podcasts that have humor in them are going to be so critical in 2026.
Well, Erica, welcome back to another episode. And this episode is pretty interesting because what we're doing right now is going to, I would say, explode, but I'm not totally sure if that's the right term. It's going to get a lot bigger. Why is that? What just happened?
A lot more attention is going to be getting paid to podcasts. I think the fact that Amy Poehler, who is super well known from so many different aspects and projects that she's been on, winning the 2026 Best Podcast Award is going to bring so many more eyes to podcasts. There were already a lot of people listening to them, watching them, but having it be an actual award at a legitimate show is really legitimizing podcasting.
Okay, so let's just set the stage for this just a little bit, okay? Because there's a lot of awards for podcasting, but they're all like podcast specific, like within the industry awards,
right?
Okay, and which is fantastic. That's great for entertainment, for education, different categories for different podcasts. But the fact that the Golden Globes, for the first time in history, had a category of podcasting, was huge.
Absolutely.
Because that totally, like you said, legitimizes podcasting as an entertainment source, basically. Will this lead to other, award shows giving podcast awards? I don't know, but the Golden Globes is a huge thing. I mean, we're talking about like motion, like feature films,
right?
But podcasts, and this was a very like kind of quiet moment, that Amy Poehler winning this award for hers. And there was like a huge list of nominees for this. Do you want to go over just a few? And maybe, if you're listening to this now or watching this, you've probably heard about some of these.
Yeah, absolutely. So the nominees were Armchair Expert with Dax Shepard, Alex Cooper's Call Her Daddy, The Mel Robbins Podcast, Smartless with Jason Bateman, Sean Hayes, and Will Arnett, and then NPR's Up First. When she was accepting the award, she did say that it was an attempt to try to make a very rough and unkind world filled with a little bit more love and laughter and laughing with people, not at them. And I think that is really critical. If we look at the list, I understand NPR is on it, but in general, a lot of those podcasts include a hint of humor, and there is a lot going on right now that's not funny.
Yeah.
And so I think for people who are trying to, have compartmentalize a little bit or have some separate spaces for quiet times or, just putting some of the other noise outside of their head, podcasts can be a space where, whether it's learning or entertainment, whatever it is, I think podcasts that have humor in them are going to be so critical in 2026 as we're communicating about different ideas and helping move forward through that.
And we'll get into a little bit about what this means for your business, but there is this term that it's kind of in the content world and maybe a little bit in the marketing world, but it's called edutainment. So it's kind of a mixture of entertainment and education, which I think is the sweet spot for businesses in 2026 that want to create like conversation, build community. We'll get into that here in just a little bit more in depth, but let's talk about some things I feel like are trending upward for podcasts. Like you have some data that we're going to go over, but let's trace it back. Let's just reverse just a little bit to the 2024 presidential election. Like I'm going to hit you with this. You ready?
Yeah.
That I'm not saying a certain candidate won because they went on certain podcasts
Right.
or took that approach rather than the traditional news interview approach. But I think what happened is, first of all, a certain candidate got a lot more eyeballs.
Mhm.
A certain candidate, it almost kind of like humanized
Right.
that candidate, not mentioning names, but you know the ones that did podcast interviews, the ones that didn't. Okay. But I think it kind of created like these long form conversations. And the podcasts that that particular candidate went on, they were long episodes,
Right.
like hours per episode.
Mhm.
And so then the vice president candidate, you know, went on these shows as well. And it just generated so much like conversation, awareness, eyeballs. I'm not saying that's why they m- may or may not have won, but I think tracing back to that even is almost like this, like it just skyrocketed at that point as well during that 2024 election.
Yeah, I think you really have to look at podcasts now and their ability to measure culture.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
Because
Yep.
whether it is popular culture and you're talking about entertainment like you're talking about, or you're talking about education, there are so many different types of podcasts that are out there and ways to engage with your audience
Yeah.
that if you're not in that space, you're missing out. And I think that even through politics, we are
Yeah.
seeing that there are always different forms of conversation. Obviously it started with written and
Yeah.
then movies came out and radio is in there as well. But podcasts are a real and I'll say video podcasts
Okay.
because
Yeah. I was
audio
gonna.
podcasts have been
Yes.
around for
I was gonna bring that up here in just a sec. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Audio podcasts have been around for a while, but really moving into this video space, it's creating an even more unique
Mm-hmm.
setting. We had talk shows on
Oh yeah.
TV where people
Totally.
would go and sit for an hour and talk to Oprah or, fill in the blank with whichever talk show
Yeah.
host you want to speak on. But having a podcast has really taken that to a less formal,
Yeah.
oftentimes, feeling. And I think the audience as a result feels like they're getting a more honest
Yep.
and transparent view of the feedback from the person on the other side of the table.
Now you bring up the video aspect, and I think this is interesting because YouTube
Mhm.
is now the largest podcast platform on the planet, overtaking Spotify,
Mhm.
overtaking Apple
Yep.
Podcasts, and the video element now is crucial. And some people argue both ways, but when it comes down to it, because what we're going to talk about here in just a little bit, it is crucial now to your podcast. And we saw that with the 2024 elections. We see that with now this category in the Golden Globes. Like, I think all of them on there are video podcasts.
Well,
I
and I
think.
I think just because you choose to do video doesn't mean that you're neglecting audio only.
Oh, yeah.
If you choose to take the audio from a video podcast and put it into an audio only format, you can still do that because there are people who are going to maybe listen to it on their drive-in or home
100%.
from work.
Yeah.
And so audio only can still be supported through that. But to miss out
Yep.
on the folks that do want the video component, if you're offering audio only, you're not getting that audience. With
Yeah.
video, you can get both sides of it.
Yep.
And so going over numbers, I think what's really, really interesting is that Netflix just inked a deal
Yeah.
pretty recently
This is
with
crazy.
iHeartMedia, Barstool, The Ringer. They're getting some of the biggest and most acclaimed names in podcast over to their library. So basically, Netflix is asking for 15 to 75. I know that's quite the
Yeah,
range,
that is quite the range.
but
I heard around like 30 some.
well, I think some of it
And
is
where to
Netflix
start in.
exclusive podcasts between ones that are also going to be
Oh, okay.
available in different
I
areas.
got you. Yeah.
And so some of those are going to leave their existing platform and be exclusively
Mm.
available on Netflix.
Crazy.
They are requesting original
Yeah.
podcast content that obviously will be exclusively Netflix, but is
Pete Davidson, I think, is
is
going
going
to
to
have
have one.
one. Yeah,
Okay,
I
so
think
those
so.
are going to be specific to they'll be organic
Yep.
within the Netflix environment. And I think looking at Netflix, seeing that this is an area that they need to invest in is really, I mean, that's that's a big statement that they're investing tens of millions of dollars. And
Yeah.
notice, I understand that their marketing budget and their operating budget is enormous, way bigger than that. This is a small deal for them. But if if we look at Netflix, they have been such a, you know, a trend leader
Yes.
in the industry.
Yep.
And so if they're starting to invest in podcasts and buying them away from competitors,
Yeah.
I think is really something that we
It's
have to pay
wild.
attention to.
That's wild. And it's crazy because, I think of like, spending time in some people's offices, maybe I'm like visiting somebody or talking with somebody in for a meeting or a planning session or whatever. It's crazy the amount of employees that actually have
Mm,
a podcast episode
yeah.
like in the corner of their monitor,
Right.
like while they're working.
Yeah.
And so they're and listening to these things, first of all, okay? But then maybe something, and this is where the video piece comes in, is like maybe something happens in that episode where they start laughing a lot, or, maybe somebody in the episode starts crying, whatever the topic is, or whatever. Now, the person that's, sitting at their desk working, now they turn their attention to what's going on in the podcast. And the video element to these podcasts now really like humanizes the whole podcast experience, which I think is one of the reasons why it's now a category at the Golden Globes, but also one of the reasons that um, Netflix
Mm.
is investing so much money is because they want that attention. Like all these platforms, they want that attention. What podcasts do is provides that attention span because it's like it's a long sorry, my phone's going off. It's a long form piece of content that people can kind of tune in, tune out when they want to.
Right.
And I think one of the interesting things about YouTube specifically is that um, a majority of long form views are now happening on TVs.
Was just
TVs.
gonna mention that in 2024, TVs took over as the main device
Yeah.
that people are using to watch and engage with YouTube. It's not mobile and it's not computers.
Yeah. Crazy.
2024, it shifted and it's only been growing since then. We don't have the 2025 numbers, or I
Yeah.
hadn't seen them yet for
Yep.
YouTube, but to know that that is the main way that these people are consuming this content, and that could be something that they have a TV in the living room that's playing while they're working in the
Yep.
kitchen and that they can see it or
Yep.
hear it from there. But, when you were talking about earlier, being able to, when somebody's laughing,
Yeah.
look,
Yeah.
you know this about it. I listen to podcasts all the
Yeah.
time,
Yep.
all the time.
Yep.
So I am listening when I'm driving to or from work. And some of the podcasts that I'll listen to, if it's one of the ones that I'm listening to because I'm doing something where I can't be watching it, I they'll be like, "Oh, I'm doing this with my hands." And they're like, "For those of you that can't see us right now," and they try to describe it. And okay, like
Yeah.
maybe I can understand what they're trying to describe, but there is a component where I feel disconnected
Yeah. Hmm.
because I'm not able to fully
Yeah.
engage with what they're
Makes sense.
talking about because I can't see it.
Yeah.
And the times when I can see it, it's such a good podcasters make you feel like you're in the room with
Right.
them. And I think that that is where, you know, NPR says that a third of Americans, a full third, are listening to or watching a podcast at least once a week.
Wow. Yeah.
And so if they're engaging at that level, there has to be something. What is the draw for them?
Mm.
And I think part of the opportunity is there's so many options,
Yeah.
you know, and I don't even mean that to say that it's saturated, because I think there are so many specific areas that have not been touched at all by podcasts. There's so much opportunity still,
Yeah.
but to say that there is an audience,
Yeah.
and they're there. So creating new content or having new shows pop up, there's still so much opportunity for growth.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see, especially with Netflix now investing so much money. First of all, it's going to be like just from a creative, it's going to be interesting just to see what they invest in as like video sets and
Ooh,
everything
yeah.
and like camera angles and all those things, like from my perspective, like I'm interested in that from a Netflix platform
Yeah.
standpoint because Netflix has very specific standards
Mhm.
for their entertainment that like there's requirements that you have to meet as producers. So just from that piece of it, like I'm interested in that, but I'm also interested in the numbers now, like as this video podcast platform is getting ready to explode even more than what it is right now. Like I'm interested to see if this form of content, especially on Netflix, becomes almost like, "Let's gather around the TV," like, almost like a traditional, like, we grew up in the TGIF era, right?
Yeah.
Like, Friday nights, like, you gathered around the TV for Full House and, Family Matters and all those great shows in the late '90s or mid
Mhm.
to late
Yeah.
'90s. It'll be interesting to see if, like, that's almost like a gathering point for people to gather around and almost, like, invest couch time and all that in front of Netflix watching these long form conversations happen.
Yeah. And I think when you're talking about people gathering, there is another stat that NPR came out with that I think is so interesting is they did a study of the top 100
Mm.
podcasts and found that 2/3 of them are led by men.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
And so when we're talking about gathering
Yeah.
or even sharing stories, I feel like, and I don't mean to lean on stereotypes here, but I feel like people would lean on the side of like women just love to talk, they want to share
Right.
stories, they want to, you know, go through that. And podcasting to me is so what a perfect vehicle for that.
Yeah.
And so to hear that 2/3 of it is men seems like there's
That's
so much
interesting.
opportunity yet for women to break through. I know that Amy Poehler as woman is the very
Right.
first person to win that award, so how fantastic.
Yeah.
Hopefully that is a sign for women to be able to continue to move into that space
Yeah.
because there I think, tech, business, some of these areas women are seriously underrepresented in. And
Yep.
and granted, because they make up a smaller percentage of the individuals that are participating in those careers. But as we help young women see
Mhm.
that those are options to move into those
Yeah.
careers, being able to lead a podcast so they can listen and hear that representation or hear those questions, not that those will be the only people in the audience, but just so much opportunity for growth,
Mm.
um, right there. I think it'll be interesting to see how women continue to move into that space and what that does to draw more people in for audiences.
Yeah, and so we talked a lot about the TV experience. I mean, that we can't forget about some of those other platforms and just the mobile platform
Mhm.
as well, which has been huge, will continue to be huge. It's like to me, honestly, it's interesting that the TV is like the most
Right.
like YouTube on TV is the most consumed
Yeah.
right now. Just because we have our devices in our hands like constantly.
Right.
But that's not to say like those platforms still matter. Like, I think, don't you have something about TikTok? Like, what's TikTok long form content?
Yeah, so it'll be interesting. TikTok is exploring both ends of the spectrum right now with long and short form content. They allow uploads of up to 60 minutes
Mm,
or 10 minutes native. So, not necessarily long form in the sense of like 2 or 3 hour podcasts, but you could
yeah.
certainly upload, a 45 to 60-minute episode if you're looking at that. But they also just released a new app for Pine Drama, which
Oh,
is
yeah.
super short form micro dramas.
Yeah,
And
right.
so we seem to have this conflicting version. I mean, YouTube's in the same boat,
Yeah,
right?
it's
Like
true.
you can have very long videos on there,
Yep.
but they also have shorts.
Yeah.
And so I think from a demographic standpoint, what does your audience want and how are they
Mhm.
consuming some of that information? Because you might have people who want to get on and watch a mid form to long form
Yeah.
content. We're looking, 30, 45, 60 minutes or 2 to 3 hours.
Right.
But
That's an investment.
I think people are missing if they're not taking some of that down to put into reels or
Yeah.
shorts or to have that audience that maybe is more focused on bite-sized,
Yeah.
snack-sized content. And then the other piece of that is with with cutting that down, again, is that allowing a gateway
Yeah.
for people who weren't ready for that longer content to be interested and intrigued, so now that they are going to roll over and listen to some of that. So it'll be interesting to see what that looks like.
Which leads us to the question, like, what does this mean for you and your business? You know, when it comes to this type of content, the podcasting type of content I feel like it means quite a bit. First of all, I'm just going to jump into it. First of all, a video podcast for your business is one of the best types of content that you can have. And I've been posting about this on LinkedIn is like you have your long form
Mhm.
conversation, human conversation, right? It's not AI generated. It's not all those things that, you know, are keywords right now. It's human conversation. Then you can cut that long form up, like you were saying, short, into shorts and reels, you know, 60-second less. And then you point people to your long form content from those reels. So you take like little highlights or little things that happened in that episode, turn those into reels, constantly show up, right? But then here's what you do. You have the audio from that podcast that you can just do an audio only on some of those other platforms. Maybe use as a voiceover for some other things, that all those options with just the audio. But then, you ready for this? I'm going to run out of fingers. Then you take the transcript, right? You turn that into a blog post. And on your blog post, you have a summary of what you talked about in the episode. And on your blog post, you have the video episode right there, like embedded from YouTube
Yep.
right on your blog post. So people can find that. Okay, but I'm not done yet. You ready? From your transcript from this episode, this podcast episode, this is just one episode,
Right.
okay? One episode. You have from your transcript, from your wording, this isn't AI generated, right? It's from your wording in your episode. You have how many social media posts?
Right.
Okay, I'm not done. I'm going over to my other hand here. You ready for this? Now you can take screenshots of the conversation that you're having, or maybe it's just like one person on camera. You can take some of that text and put it on those screenshots,
Right.
build carousels,
Yep.
all these things just from one episode
Yeah.
of a podcast. Now imagine that compounding over time for your business with the education piece of it, like answering common questions that you get from customers, turn those questions into a podcast episode that compounds over time. You're consistent with it. You will be impossible to ignore. I guarantee you, after 15, 20 episodes, you will be impossible to ignore. And here's the thing. Most podcasts, like 93%, that last little number is a little foggy. 93 to 95% of podcasts don't make it to episode 10.
Yeah.
Don't make it past episode 10.
Yep.
Imagine if you could make this is where we come in here, obviously. We help you stay consistent with it because we make it easy to come in and record. But imagine episode 20, 25, 30, all of that information that is constantly out there for your business.
I think what you said earlier about it compounding
Yeah.
is so important. We've had people ask for referrals to this space,
Mm-hmm.
and being able to share video of that, I feel like, is very powerful.
Yep.
People have told us that it's very powerful.
Right.
Not just reading a written review, that's
Yeah.
fantastic,
Yep.
but being able to see and hear that person honestly sharing their thoughts and their take on it. There's something about video that is really transformative. We talk about it being your first impression.
Yeah.
You know, they see your website, and we've heard a lot of times before that that's their first impression of you. But before you can even shake somebody's hand or before they walk through the door, you know, before somebody does business with you, you always hear they need to know, like, and trust you,
Yeah.
and they have to know you first, then they like you, then they trust you. You hopefully get through that whole spectrum. That can happen from a podcast before someone has walked in your door,
100%.
before they have even talked to you. And I think that is where you take some of the work off of your in-person people. You're not necessarily having to fight so hard for some of those conversions
Yeah.
after the first meeting because they've already decided to do business with you
Right.
because of some of this.
Yeah.
And really positioning yourself as an expert
Oh, yeah.
is where that trust component comes in. And so having those conversations, like you said, take the questions that people ask you. You don't have to fight too hard to
Yeah,
find
I
content
mean, you get questions on a regular
all the
basis.
time. What's your FAQ page
Yeah.
on your website? And then just talk through those. I know something that I've said before is I would love for a body shop, like a vehicle mechanic repair shop here in town to start a podcast and speak in plain terms to people about what they're doing for repairs. And I don't mean necessarily like describing the repairs itself, but just some different components of
Common
that
language, yeah.
because how oftentimes does somebody cringe? They even hold off
Yeah.
on getting their vehicle fixed because they don't trust the other side of that. So if you can break through that barrier and get people to know, like, and trust you through these podcasts, like I said, what does that mean for conversions
Yeah.
and being top of mind?
Oh, yeah. Top of mind, huge.
Like, that's a thing. It might not be an immediate sale. It might be just making sure that people know when they think X, they think you.
Right.
Your name immediately comes to mind.
Mhm.
And it's getting that information out there that I think is so critical. And the one last thing that I'll say, because I think there's a real misunderstanding for people of how podcasts are ingested sometimes,
Mhm.
is that it doesn't necessarily all have to be at one setting.
Nope, not at all.
So I listen to some 2 and 3 hour podcasts. I have a history one that I love listening
Yeah.
to. Those are long episodes. If you think that I'm sitting there the whole time that I'm watching this, that is not what's
Yeah.
happening here. It could take me days to
Yeah.
watch this whole podcast or even listen to it if I'm just doing the audio only version. And so for some people who are like, "Oh, like our clientele
Yeah.
wouldn't get, a 30-minute podcast isn't gonna work for them." You don't know that.
Yeah, you don't know it.
You don't know that.
Well, and here's the thing too, is like, people might not take the whole episode, like, be like, "Oh, this was life-changing." But there might be like 1 to 2 nuggets
Yeah.
in that episode that makes it totally worth it,
Right.
that customer is like, "Oh, you know what? I didn't think of it that way. I should go talk to this person."
Right.
Or, "I should go buy that product,"
Mhm.
or whatever that is.
Mhm.
I think we've covered a lot of stuff, and I think we're getting, like, really worked up in this episode. We're gonna continue this conversation in future episodes, and one of the things that really intrigues me about podcasting is not even taking it from a customer's perspective, but from an internal perspective
Mhm.
for your company, and using podcasting as a culture builder
Yes.
and a company training,
Mhm.
uh, ecosystem,
Yep.
using your podcast internally just for your employees. So that's gonna be a whole nother conversation. But for this conversation, so you wanna make sure you subscribe so you don't miss that. But for this conversation, is there anything else you wanna add about podcasting and how it could change somebody's business?
I think the biggest thing is you just gotta start.
Yeah, you just gotta start. I mean, here at the Video Lab, we make it easy for you. I mean, we can even do some of the strategy, and we're introducing hosting as well for
Yep.
podcasts. So if you wanna have if your company wants to have a podcast, you don't know who's gonna host it, we can provide hosts for you and take care of that piece of it where you just come in and record, sit here and record.
Yep.
So, all right, well, that wraps it up for this episode. Make sure you subscribe. This is the Video Lab show where we talk about video marketing, video content, and video platforms. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. We'll see you in the next episode.